Hello, everyone. Welcome to another office hour. This is Claire Moon. I will be your astrologer for the evening. If you look to the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a chat window there. Everyone. Another office hour. Sorry. I had sound inception. Hold on. Let's see if I figured it out. I think we're good now. Sorry. Anyway, there's a 20-second delay. So if you put something in the chat, just know that I'm going to be checking in with it a lot. Like that's why we're here, but it may take me a moment to get to it. I do have like 5 really good questions today. So, I mean, I don't even know I was kind of going through them in my mind earlier, and I don't even know if we're going to be able to get through all 5 of these. So depending on what comes in the chat, especially if they're like quick little questions or things like that, we'll definitely get those into. But if it's like a big one, it may have to wait until next time. So with that, let's see. Do I have any announcements before we jump in? I don't think so. My books are open as usual. If you want to go to www.aligninglightastrology.com, that is where you can find all my stuff, my writings, my newsletter sign up, my bookings, all of the service descriptions, and also sign up for the newsletter because I do have a lot of discount codes that come through there. Right now I have Saturn. I think let me actually double check. I'm pretty sure it is. But then otherwise, there's one I always have going on, and that is Astrology Podcast. So if you use the discount code Astrology Podcast, it'll get you 10% off of any service. But then I found it here. Did I find it? Yeah, until the 22nd of November. I have a 20% off discount, and the code is Saturn. S as in Sam, S as in Saturn, A, T as in turtle, U, R as in rainbow, N as in Nevada. And that goes as a 20% off code. And that's for new and return client readings. So yeah, sign up for my newsletter. That's how you get all them deets slipped right into your inbox. I actually wrote something about Mars and Scorpio. Let's get the clock up here. We only have not ever long enough with Mars and Scorpio. Oh my goodness. I have just been loving this. I am biased. I have that. How much longer do we have them here? Hold on. It's usually 6 weeks in a sign. Work smarter, not harder. That would be November 24th. So we've got another good 2 weeks with Mars and Scorpio. Anyway, I did a little writing on that. So go check it out at my website. That was the point. So I'm going to start in with questions. Is anyone here? Fionn Cleary is here. Sparkles of Gold Nicholas is here. Thank you so much for being here. Creating Harmony is here. Hello, welcome everyone. Yeah. Oh, I am so biased, but it's just I've been getting stuff done. Like, I don't know why I don't feel like this all the time. It's in my birth chart. But it's like, yeah, it's been nice. So I'm going to start with a question from Lakai, who is a friend of the show, of course. I don't know if Lakai is here. And that's a good point, too. You do not have to be here live to have a question answered. Usually I do a call for questions beforehand on Instagram. So definitely follow me on Instagram, Aligning Light Astrology. But yeah, that's okay. You don't have to be present to win. I will still read your question and answer it. And 2, just a couple quick things. Creating Harmony. I don't remember if you have any wares that you sell or if you're an astrologer, but I know Fionn is. And I know Nicholas from Sparkles of Gold is an astrologer as well. And they're both fantastic. So both please subscribe to their channels and all of their thingies. They are great Inspirations, of course. So Lakai asks, what are your top considerations for finding happiness and fulfillment in clients' charts? I'll read that again. What are my top considerations for finding happiness and fulfillment in clients' charts? So thank you for that lovely question, because I think, right, we're always looking for the the challenges, the probs. But let's look for some good stuff. And I actually linked below, there's a really great lecture on just this very question from Leisa Schaim. And I have a link to it on her website. It's only $15, but it's a really good lecture. And I want to cite Leisa Schaim, but I don't want to scoop her. But I will talk a little bit about Venus and Jupiter in answering this question, and I get a little bit of that from her, so I'll name that when it comes. But essentially, one of the coolest things I got out of that lecture from Leisa Schaim was that essentially to feel like things are going okay in life, and I'm paraphrasing, she's going to say it a lot more eloquently than I will, but for things to feel decent, we need to have three things. And that is belonging, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a sense of progress, making some kind of progress. And if one of those things isn't going well, not great. If two of those things aren't happening, belonging, purpose, progress, if two of those things are missing, that feels pretty bad. If all three of those are missing, things are feeling pretty bad, for our overall quality of life. And it makes sense. Like if we think about belonging, speaking of ding, 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 like Venus in Libra as of yesterday, yay. But yeah, like belonging, Venus, Libra, that's a Venus thing. So we want to talk about Venus in someone's chart and even Libra and what's going on there. Just in general, they're peopling, and there's a whole big discussion one could have on how to analyze all the peopling that happens in a chart. So for our peopling triangle, we have, the third, our local familiar people, seventh house, our partners, 11th house, our bigger groups and networks. Looking at that and seeing how people feel and how people are doing. Do they have a bunch of 12th house stuff? Are they lonely? Or do they enjoy their alone time so much that their social health and wellness, that's that wellness triangle, physical, social, mental, that the social part of that triangle is not happening. So, we can think about belonging, we can think about Venus, and explore those things with the client. So that's thing one. Thing two then would be more on purpose. And for that, I'm looking to Jupiter. And I know you said happiness, and we're going to come back to that with Venus. But with purpose, I do think about Jupiter. So looking to where Jupiter is in a chart somewhere. And P.S., I was totally I didn't explain myself at all. Peopling triangle, I was circling. I had mentioned the house topics. I'm just using this current clock as a made up person. Like if this was a person, this would be what we would be talking about with them. All of their earth places. But anyway, purpose, look for what Jupiter's doing in their chart. Maybe like this person, they would have Jupiter in their 11th. So maybe friend groups are really important to them, or networks, or aspirations, hopes, dreams, maybe following those things are just really a place where they find a lot of meaning doing those things, whether or not they get paid for it, that's a separate issue. If I see Jupiter in the second, it might be like, yeah, you might find a lot of meaning and purpose making money, that could be, not to say someone is greedy, but just more in a foundational way, the second house of having a stable foundation of resources. Maybe there's a lot of purpose and meaning in just cultivating a stable amount of resources to live a peaceful life, so we can look to Jupiter for that question. And then a sense of progress, that one gets really complicated for me. I feel like depending on what the client is going through, I'm going to be looking for all kinds of challenges or supports in any way where progress might feel blocked. And I don't mean to over romanticize progress. Like I think there's a lot of good points out on the internet right now about It's not always about progress. It's not always about achieving. Like, what about just being? I'm not a human doing, I'm a human being. Yes. At the same time, I think, and this is what I get talking to people. People feel bad when, there's not at least some, like with any of their goals or anything in life, if there's not some sense of forward movement. So I hope that makes sense. It's somewhere in the middle of people, it's not all about achievement, but if there's no change or progress happening, or that feeling of stagnation that people talk about a lot with me. That can be a really complicated question to explore, but it is one to explore. With happiness, going back to that, I looked at Venus. What might be pleasurable? Pleasures and delights. The fifth house too. What is, and that, the fifth house is so complicated. Like even this made up person, I shouldn't say made up, someone got born. Someone was born. Someone got born. Someone was born. So yeah, this is a real person now. I have a feeling that what they might consider fun with kind of like this intense Scorpio situation in the fifth, this might not be like what someone might conventionally think is mainstream fun. So you can never assume that stuff. People are all over the map with that stuff. So I like to just ask people what things they enjoy. Now, that was a kind of meta consideration too that I had with asking people, like, in consult, in when you're in that consultation space with a client, what they enjoy. That's kind of like a very cool thing to be able to consider, that I've realized like a lot of people don't have the privilege to even think about that question, like depending on the culture you're from, your life circumstances, your financial situation, your relational situation. I talk to people plenty that, when we get to this discussion of happiness and joy and fulfillment, and purpose and all these bigger questions of like, how the hell do I have a life that feels good and not bad? They haven't even had the chance to really explore like what they like, which is actually gets to be kind of a sad discussion sometimes. But it's a very real one. So then the homework for them is to explore, and astrology can kind of help us to look at like the fifth house, look to Venus, look to Jupiter. And like the lot of Eros is another one. I don't have it up here, but the lot of Eros can speak to, romantic stuff. But I also think just like what you enjoy, what you like, what might be fun for you. So yeah, we can kind of point the client to some potential clues about what might feel good. But the homework for that person then who doesn't know what they might prefer or enjoy is to explore those things, basically. And my kind of boring way of telling them is like, just notice, notice when your heart gets on fire to do something, or when you feel inspired, or when something fills your cup versus depletes it. All these kind of signal indicators that something cool is happening. So yeah, I think those are basically my cliff notes. I'm going to check in with the chat here and see if my it's chider season, is ready for me to drink it, because it was really hot. All right. Nicole Wilson is here. Oh, they have a question too. That's a quick one. We'll definitely do that one next. Creating Harmony is also an astrologer. They have an Etsy account called Harmony Through Astrology. Yeah, I could have swore. That's why I was like, yeah, cool. Etsy is awesome. It's so interesting. This is the first year I've seen Etsy have commercials on TV. I don't know if other people have been seeing that, because I also just recently started watching TV again for the first time in like ever. And I was like, wow, Etsy's got TV commercials. Interesting. Let's see. Yeah, cider, apple cider with chai. It's really, really good. But anyway, thank you, Lakai, for that question. I hope that helps. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. And welcome back, stars and gamers. I appreciate you. All right, let's answer this question about Mars Cazimi. Do I consider Mars Cazimi with the sun 1 degree or less? Yeah, I'm the 1 degree person because of Hellenistic astrology. And also conceptually, I like the idea that like thinking about degrees as like a step on a staircase. And if we think about planets that are like on a staircase, you know, and each degree is a step, like for instance, right now, the sun, they would be on one step, and then Mars, 19 degrees, would be two steps up. If a planet is in the same degree, they're like standing on the same step together. So for me, that's kind of my rationale about why I feel like conceptually it makes sense to me that 1 degree would be enough. Experientially, I've seen it play out where I mean, statistics brain me is like, no, this isn't enough people. But I've probably had about 10 people out of my 1,000. I don't know how many consults I've done now. I haven't looked in a long time, but I'm sure it's upwards of over 1,000 now. But at least 10 of them have had a cazimi within a degree. And that planet, like the planet that is with the sun, they were doing really well. Like everything was growing really great for them, and the houses that planet was ruling. So that was enough to like seeing that in people's charts was enough to make me think that 1 degree was enough. Now, like let's say I'm doing like astrological magic operations or something like that, I'm probably going to use the 17 arc minute thing if I can. If I'm like choosing an election and I have the option to do the more specific one, sure, like I'll do that. That's fine. So hopefully that answers that, but that's a really good question. Okay, let's see. Let's go on to the next one. Well, oh God, it is so good. I love having a Pisces moon. I swear to God, I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling things taste better. I just have a feeling that things taste better when you have a Pisces moon. No one can ever really answer this question for sure. Actually, maybe if we looked at secondary progressions or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how you would answer that. All right. Let me look at the next one here. Adam asks, who are my favorite Hellenistic astrologers? Which one deserves more recognition? I love this question, and I wanted to kind of cheat because one of the people isn't a Hellenistic astrologer. He was before that, and it was Berosus. Air horns, boo, 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 Berosus. Berosus was, I think it was from like the 5th century. I'm pretty sure, like the 5th century BCE. So before Hellenistic astrology, which didn't really start more till like 1st century BCE or so, 2nd or 1st century BCE. But he was responsible for transmitting Mesopotamian mundane astrology and translating it into Greek and basically making it so that Western astrology could happen in a lot of ways. And started an astrology school. And all of this comes from Chris Brennan's book, Hellenistic Astrology. And I was just reading it again recently. So I was like, oh yeah, Berosus. So he's cool. He deserves a beep, beep, beep. But otherwise, besides like Valens, because I feel like Valens is like, yeah, everybody's like Valens, like, of course. But also Dorotheus, 1st century CE guy. And I have not read this book like cover to cover. Like I'm not that impressive. I use it as a cookbook when I'm like electing stuff or like, looking for things. I just look for what I need. So I've definitely not read all of this, but it's been thebomb.com the whole time. So yeah, Dorotheus. That's the answer to that question. And thank you. That's a good one. Oh, and I suppose I'll shout this out. This is Dorotheus of Sidon Carmen Astrologicum, the Umar El Tabari translation by Benjamin Dykes, PhD. Probably everywhere, all the bookstores. Let's see. Oh, Nicole. Oh, so you might have that Mars cazimi in your solar return chart. I see. Yeah. Yeah. I want you to have all the good. Mars energy too. I mean, and you will either way, like whether or not Mars is Cazimi, it's the sun in this situation. Because Mars in Scorpio has its little sunbrella, it has its chariot, so it'll be okay no matter what. But yeah, anyway, either way, it's really nice to have Kazemi. Totally. I'm kind of excited for it. I feel like I'm finally far enough into my practice where I'm looking back and like just realizing all the transits I wish I would have been watching. God dang it. But you can only watch so much at a time. Let's see. Megator has a question. Does an outer planet on your natal ascendant affect relationships with same age peers? So this was a really interesting question too. And I wonder if I can illustrate it. Let me see here. I feel like my main demographic is like the Neptune Uranus conjunction in Capricorn group. Where are you? Hold on. We're going back to the 90s, my friends. Here, this business. All right. So there's these little sub-generations of people who are going to have some outer planet stuff happening. And they're all going to have like the same signature. Mine is like a Saturn Uranus conjunction. I have a lot of peers who have a similar configuration in their chart, and we all kind of share that in common. So then the question is, I'm going to read it again. And thank you, Megataurus. It's a great question. Does an outer planet on your natal ascendant affect relationships with same age peers? So imagine a world. Let me see if I can get it up here. Hold up. I want to pretend like this is a person. Let's say we have a Capricorn rising. We've got Uranus and Neptune on the ascendant. And let's say this person's walking along, beep, 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 beep. And do I have any? No, I don't need it. So they're walking along and they meet some other people who have this in their chart as well. What happens basically? And does that affect the relationship? And I guess when I was thinking about the question, like on how it affects the relationship, or I mean, on the question, does it affect the relationship? Sure. But then I'm like, everything does. Everything is going to affect your relationships, like in with this hypothetical person. Of course, Mars is going to affect what's going on with their relationship. Jupiter can see both of these houses, so that's going to affect things. The sun also, same thing. So there's a lot that goes into interpreting, effects on a relationship and seeing or looking at like things happening in a relationship and seeing the reflection in a chart. There's just like a lot of things there. So I kind of wanted to give like a non-politician answer. But what I can say is whoever the person is with this on their ascendant, they're going to really showcase what this is for everybody else. So if I am born around the same time, within 1991, 92, maybe 93, somewhere in there, well, probably longer than that. I think even just in the sign together. So there's quite a several year swath of people who would have this. Like, let's say I have this in my 10th house or something. I might meet you at work, I might run into this energy, in my 10th house. You might be that energy that I run into there. Or, you might highlight some theme that's going on in my 10th, or say it's in my second. You might highlight, as this Capricorn person, something that would resonate with me if I related it to my money or my resources. So I think it highlights something that your peers would be really familiar with, and you would be able to maybe connect over that. But it would probably depend a lot on a lot of other factors, if that makes sense. So like really interesting like thought to just think about, like, yeah, what does that mean if I'm kind of as the outer planet on the rising sign, how am I showing up to my peers who have this somewhere in their chart, and they all have it. And yeah, you're going to, but that's also kind of the case for everything too, so this person, they would also demonstrate their Scorpio things to people. And depending on what other people have, that may or may not resonate with their chart. So yeah. Really cool question. Yeah, exactly. Creating harmony. Whale, dolphin, fish emoji for sure. I shout them out a lot. I love that generation because it's like they understand the establishment stuff and they're very committed to like changing it and making it different. It's like there's floorboards, but Neptune and Uranus are like, kind of dissolving them a little bit and ripping them up. So let's move on to the next question. Cecilia asks, how do you interpret the midheaven when it's not in the 10th house? And I love that question. It's a very popular question. I actually put in the links below a link to an episode from the Astrology podcast on house divisions that Chris Brennan did with Luis Ribeiro back in, I don't remember, it wasn't that long ago, but phenomenal episode. Like they go through all of the ways of dividing houses, which I know is not your question. But it's way into the weeds and it can show people like, well, why is the midheaven in, a floating over in a different house and in this type of house system, but why is it the start of the 10th and all of these other systems? So if you're really wanting to know like in depth about that, hit that link below. It's really amazing resource and it's free, but I will show you. So here's a good example. All right, so let's look at this person who is a Capricorn rising, and they have in Madison, Wisconsin in November, at the moment of their birth, Capricorn would have been rising tropically over the east. So if we make, let's see here. We can pretend like this is the person. The ascendant is the east where planets rise. The descendant is the west where planets set. We've got the sky above our head, and we've got the midheaven up here, the MC, the medium Chile. I don't know what that means. The middle something. It is the midheaven, and it is where it's the point where a planet on the ecliptic gets the highest in the sky that it's going to get that day at that latitude during that time of year. So that highest point in the sky, the midheaven, is symbolically associated with the 10th house. This is in a lot of quadrant-based systems where the 10th house would start. So then let's actually just look at that right now. I'll just pick Placidus because I think that's common. Yeah, so we can see here the whole 10th house. This is still like, what is this? I can't even read it. I don't know how to read stuff. Oh no, y'all. But it's at whatever degree this is. I never read Placidus. It's at whatever degree this is in Scorpio, but this is the whole 10th house. And it just starts there at that degree. So I'm just going to keep that there. And then if we go back to whole sign, yeah, 9 degrees. Now we see that the start of the 10th house is actually is Libra. It's not even, it started here before, if we remember. So different house systems are going to give us different results, but no matter how we visualize it, the midheaven is the highest point in the sky and symbolically is thus public life, what people know of you, what people remember about you, and thus usually our career, what we're doing here. One of the Greek terms was praxis meaning something you're regularly doing, your practice basically. So that's the midheaven. And so this is always going to have to do with career, life path, those type of topics that are the same bucket of topics that we associate with the 10th house. So 10th house topics, mid-house topics, they are the same. So then when you get the midheaven floating around, which happens the higher and higher latitudes you go, south or north, the further away from the equator you get, the further and further this midheaven can drift. And in quadrant-based houses, we see the same thing come out as like houses getting really, really squished and just like super distorted and wild looking. But in any event, here, at least in Wisconsin, almost in Canada, I guess, relatively speaking, we're in the 11th. And so then we essentially blend 10th house topics with 11th house topics. If the midheaven were in the 9th, we would blend 10th house topics with 9th house topics. So for instance, here in the 11th house, I would say, maybe something about your career, something about your life path, something about what you're known for, your public life, is going to have to do with 11th house things like friend groups. Maybe you get a job through a friend. Maybe you are doing public things with your friends. Maybe you're all giving a presentation at the nerd conference, it can be as boring as that. It can be just a lot of networking being important in your work. A lot of industries, networking in the community and who is very, very important. It can have to do with organizational work in the 11th. Also, your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. So I love telling people, it's one of my favorite things to tell people. I just did it today. I can give people the corny advice that your part of your life path is following your hopes and dreams, So like it can be kind of fun that way, but we have to kind of pick through more information. Now, another thing that becomes interesting when we have the midheaven floating into a different house is that now if I'm trying to analyze career, vocation, kind of life path, purpose for people, and shoot, I haven't talked about the lot of spirit. I need to remember to talk about the lot of spirit. But now I have 2 planetary rulers that I need to deal with. So 10th house in this case would be ruled by Venus. So I would need to then look at Venus and what they're bringing in. Oh, wow. How nice. Man, 1992. Had it going on. Look at that. Nice mutual reception between benefics, whoever those people are. Jealous. What is that? Anyway, distracted. So the ruler of the 10th is in the 12th. So we would analyze that. And then also I would need to look at the ruler of the midheaven, which would be Mars. So there's 2 different planets in this person's case that I'm going to be looking at, as part of my analysis of vocation or career. The lot of spirit. I forgot to mention it in the discussion about happiness and fulfillment, but the lot of spirit also would be something that I would look at for, life path, life purpose, because that's where our free will kind of wants to draw us toward, is wherever the lot of spirit is. So let me get that up here. So anyway, in terms of fulfillment, I look and see, okay, lot of spirit. Are there any outlets in that person's life that speak to like what that will might want to be doing? Whether they're getting paid for it or not, that's not really the point. The point is more, is their will having agency to do what it wants to do? So that is an important discussion in happiness and fulfillment in the life. It is also an important point to make. I can't make it show up here. I'm probably just going too fast, but yeah, it's also the lot of spirit is also a point I would look for when looking at career and life path as well. So midheaven stuff, but I would also look at that. So there's actually like a lot of different things that we can look at in that analysis. But certainly things get more complicated when the angle floats around. I mean, if we were just looking at, looking at this in a quadrant-based system, and this is no shade, anytime we're looking at a different house system, it's basically like if this is the person or the event, looking at it from this angle, gonna get in the profile shot versus this angle, and then we can use all of that data and triangulate like a GPS and kind of get an even better look at things. So then if we were using Placidus, then I would really only be, pretty much looking at this. Maybe we could get to the same story because there's like this tiny chunk of Sag. And that would bring us over to Jupiter here though. So that would still bring us into this Libra territory. So we can see that too with different house systems. Sometimes I feel like we get the same story. We just got there in a different dialect or way. It sounded different on the way there, but we still got there. So in any event, that's how those things change between those two house systems. I hope that helps. I think that's it. And I guess, while we're here, let me just say that like the same thing is up with the IC. And this one kind of confabulates us a little bit because I don't know why. I guess it's just weirder to think about sometimes depending on situations. But in this case, the person's IC, the earth point, the midnight point, being in the 5th house, bringing what are 4th house topics. So IC and 4th house, same set of topics: home, family, dwelling, parents, parent relationship, origins, ancestry, things of that nature, psychologically, the conditioning of our origins, that getting melded in with 5th house topics here. So creativity, self-expression, children relationships, all kinds of rest, leisure, rejuvenation topics, romance, all of that kind of getting melded together. So we have to get really creative and start to think about ways in which these areas of life could start to intersect and what that might look like. One kind of cute way that this comes out for me, I have my IC in the 5th, in the whole sign 5th. And for me, that comes out as in, I need to live in a place that's also like my art studio. Like I just want to live in a big warehouse, like box and just like, it's an art space. There's so much room for activities. Like that would be a dream for me. And if you need, look at, I have a sewing machine over here. It's always something with me. I have a pole in my living room because everyone knows I do that. So yeah, I want to have like my creative self-expression, my 5th house stuff entwined with my home. And much to the chagrin of my parents, I have brought my pole home to Minnesota because I was training for a competition. And I put it up in the entryway, and it was very upsetting for everyone. So yeah, IC in the 5th. Very great. Okay, so let's see here. Before I go on to the next question, let's see if there's any in the chat. Victoria Souza, welcome back. Hello. There's still plenty of time. There's plenty of time. James says they have a trick with the midheaven in a different house that seems to work. If the rulers of the midheaven and the 10th are in a major aspect, I consider both. If not, I privilege the midheaven ruler absent other factors. That's really interesting. I don't know. That's like totally, I can imagine trying that and kind of poking around with that and seeing how that works. But thank you for bringing up a really good point that I did not bring up, in that if there are 2 planets that are ruling over a topic, it is always good to look if they have an aspect with each other. So in this case, we would say, okay, we've got the ruler of this whole sign 10th in Venus, and we have the ruler of the whole, or of the midheaven, with Mars, and they are not, Venus and Mars, these 2 rulers are not sharing a traditional aspect. So they are really not communicating very well. And so we might imagine, practically speaking, that, these areas of life might be somewhat disjointed. They might feel like they have a few different ways of going about career or life path that maybe don't really reconcile with each other. And maybe they struggle with knowing which or how to do both or more than one thing, or, or maybe they have these disparate things and they're trying to figure out how to put them together into something. And it takes a long time or other factors to make things work over, the course of a life. So we can see some disjointedness potentially. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up, James. That was a super good point. But then again, James saying that another way of thinking about it is is maybe prioritize, if they don't have that aspect, what he does is prioritizes the midheaven ruler. And I would do that too, honestly, in this case, because I mean, that makes sense to me. Just because, again, like astronomically, the midheaven is the highest part of the sky. This is the most important part, you know? So I would definitely choose midheaven, in this case, Mars and all that stuff too. Oh, there's my loudest spirit. It's in Cancer for this person. So yeah, I agree. And, we would see that, if I put this again, let's just be shuffling all around with the things, then we can see that this is the ninth over here. Libra is more about the ninth house from that quadrant-based perspective. And we can see pretty clearly that if we're dealing with career things, we should be looking at the cusp of the 10th. So, makes sense to me to prioritize the midheaven for sure. Okay. Let's see. Victoria says, my IC is in the 3rd house, and my mom's brother and sister helped raise me even into my adulthood. And hi. Yeah, that is such a common one. Thank you for sharing that. So the situation where maybe we would have the IC not in the 5th house, like I was describing in my situation, but in the 3rd house, like Victoria's situation. And we have 3rd house, which is extended relatives, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, in-laws, anyone who's not basically your parents, not your grandparents. And the 4th house being your parents. And when we see the IC and floating over into the whole sign 3rd, sometimes we'll see people whose parental figures or guardians were more these 3rd house people. Siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone else, basically neighbors even, or friends of the family, any familiar person in the 3rd, really. So yeah, that one I actually hear a lot, especially like baby boomer and older, that generation. There is so much of that, but a lot of those have to do with, oh, mom had someone out of wedlock. And so we had to pretend like so-and-so was my parent because my mom couldn't, be open about that. So those are kind of sadder situations where I see in the 3rd, that's kind of what we see. And that can, again, it's just kind of more information when it floats around. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And James is bringing in some other factors too. Yeah. So always gotta do that. My annoying parent answer of it's about the whole chart. Stars and Gamers, their 10th house ruler and their midheaven are conjunct. So they have like the 10th house ruler in the 10th with the midheaven. So yeah, that's when that happens. And I do have my midheaven floating, but I do have the ruler of the 10th in the 10th. And it does really kind of makes things vivid. Like you're getting like a very concentrated shade of that hue, if that makes sense. Let's see. Victoria Souza, I know you're not that old, but that's another way that comes up is, yeah, we're hiding our illegitimate out of wedlock moms. So sad. Oh, okay, let's see here. Another question. I think this is the last one. This is from Fallen Soap 1. What's the difference in having your ruling planet in domicile, exaltation, fall, or detriment? Home, so being in its home sign, exaltation, being in fall, or being in detriment. So this is the dignity discussion. There's a bunch of different types of dignity, and you just listed a lot of them. So each sign has a domicile lord, an exaltation lord, a bound or term, those are the same thing, lord, decan lord, all of those types of lords. And then that speaks to essentially resourcing. How well is that planet in that sign resourced? That's the question that we're really looking at when we're asking about dignity. So if a planet is in its own sign, like let's say the moon is in Cancer, or let's do Venus right now. Oh my gosh, yay Venus. Ah, hail our illustrious laughter loving queen. The Orphic hymn for Venus is so long, and I remember trying to learn it, and I'm like, this is like a big ask. But I was like, this is actually appropriate though, because she's worth it. Like maybe she was born with it. Maybe it's Venus and Libra. But anyway, I digress. A planet in its own domicile. It's like being in your own home. You have a lot of resources that you chose. I think that's the most important thing, is like, it's the tools that you would choose for yourself that align with what you're trying to do. So if Venus is trying to relate and have right relationship, in her bucket of tools, she has, I don't know, yummy food or nice stationery, or like, I don't know, she goes to experiences that have people that she can be with to do her things. She has a philosophy book, she has all the things she needs to do her Venus relating ethical discussions. When a planet is in antithesis, another name for that is detriment, or detriment, antithesis, exile is another name. So all of those are talking about the same thing. What happens when a planet is as far away from home as possible? And this home thing too, let me back up, because the home thing is a very like Greco-Roman type of idea. And this whole thing is an analogy or a metaphor. I forget which one of those words is correct, but it comes from the householder model. And when we're thinking about house rulership, one of the words that the Greeks used was wiki despotes. Wiki, I think there's like head of household was the rough translation, wiki despotes. So Venus here is the wiki despotes of Libra. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but I'm pretty sure the yogurt commercial helped. Anyway, when Venus is in Aries, this is as far away from home as she could be. And she is not given her cool stationery and her ethical textbook and her dinner party or whatever. She is given like a machete to chop through the jungle and do a bunch of really physical things, or go into battle, or things like that. So, or just be really expressive, be really assertive. In Libra, we want to consider the other. In Aries, she's kind of said, no, actually, that's your natural state, but we want you to betray your natural state and be a different way. And so Venus has then to adapt, or any planet that's in exile, antithesis, detriment, any of those planets, they have to adapt and become resourceful, be creative, use resources they don't want to use to get their job done. So it can really, that's kind of the silver linings, that planets that are in these more difficult positions away from their homes, they do end up with a lot of really interesting skills and stories and experiences, but it is often experienced as difficult or challenging. And it doesn't mean that like that planet is not capable of doing what it needs to do, but it's kind of fighting against a current a bit. And it's fighting, maybe like being subculture. I find that a lot with planets in antithesis, that they're not going with the mainstream. And anytime you're kind of swimming against that mainstream, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, but it does make your life harder. And that's the experience, I think, that people experience. So like, we'll talk about, maybe Mercury in fall and detriment in Pisces, and that experience. So think about resourcing, think about having the tools that are most, natural or desired for that planet to do its stuff. And then also think about the planet being able to align with its essential nature. Being in its own home, it is very easy to align with its essential nature. When it's far away from home, it can't. And we can also think about, okay, what's it like being really far away from home? If you've ever been to a place that's really different from where you grew up, like, yeah, that'll do it. So yeah, antithesis, detriment, exile. The words all sound like what it is, which is why they're all great. Although I have gotten away a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with the word detriment. Please keep using it. But I do feel like, and it could just be me projecting my fear onto my clients, I'm not sure, but I do fear that it scares clients when that word comes up. And I generally don't use that technical kind of language, but like a newer student of astrology or someone who's like an enthusiast and has stumbled upon that word, and I'm trying to explain it, I can tell they're kind of shaken up about it. They're kind of like nervous about it when they come to me with that word, or if that word comes up. So I like antithesis, because one, a lot of people don't know what that word means. Ooh, I still got to figure out what in the heck these bubbles are. I did an update and I keep not looking at what happened when I did that update. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. That was pretty much it. So, okay. When we're talking about antithesis, oh yeah, people don't know what that word means, which is handy, because then it's just kind of like people aren't as attached and don't bring the baggage to the word. But wait, give it 10 more years and I won't be able to use antithesis anymore either, which is fine. You know, we can be flexible with language. That's okay. But yeah, an antithesis just feels like it's like just like about being the opposite. It's pretty just declarative in that way and neutral feeling, but that's my own opinion. And use whatever word you want. And I hear all of them all over the place. I think detriment is still the most popular word, if I'm just looking at like Twitter. So then let's talk about the other two then, fall and exaltation. And these are like kind of more ratcheted up versions, I feel like, of in domicile and antithesis. So we can think about this householder model where we have our wiki despotes, our head of household. They have control of the resources. They also have all the responsibility of running a household. And I will get to like how to practically interpret this for a person in a minute. I realize I haven't talked about that at all. I will get to that. So think about the householder. They have all these resources. They also have all the responsibility of someone who owns a house. You know, like right now I have to figure out how to clean out gutters in this place that I'm renting. I'm renting like a house, which is awesome, but like, man, there's like gutters, and that's a whole thing. So like, yeah, that's being a you know, in your domicile. And whoever is in your domicile, you are responsible for. So for instance, Mars in Scorpio, they've been responsible for Mercury and Sun for a while, and all of their resources, which thankfully for Sun and Mercury, it's awesome for them. They get all of Mars's resources, basically at their disposal. If you are in exaltation, so let's say you're the moon in Taurus, you are now the guest of honor. You get all of the best resources, just like when your friends come over, you give them all of your best stuff, like, and all of your yummiest things. And like, I make the green bean hot dish from scratch instead of with the canned stuff. Like that's what you do for the guest of honor. They also don't have any of the responsibility. So depending on the time frame that you're looking at, Hellenistic versus like medieval, there's this discussion of like, well, which one's quote unquote better, or which one is more quote unquote powerful. And I think it kind of depends on how you think about it, whether the domicile or the exaltation lord is the quote unquote better or quote unquote more powerful one to have. I don't know. It depends. Like, do you want control over resources, or do you just want more resources without having to do as much? That's the question. Now, when we look at a planet that is in a condition, because this is really what we're doing, dignity is about planetary condition. If we back up and zoom out, we're really talking about how well is this planet able to do its job? How well is this planet able to do what it wants to do and have agency to do what it wants to do? That is one question. So planetary condition. I don't like the word like effectiveness or efficacy in all situations, but in this one, it makes sense to say like, how effective is that planet at doing that planet stuff? The second question is, how does that affect the person? That's a different question. So just because you have a Libra Venus, that does not mean all your relationships are going to be a slam dunk. And that does not mean that you're not going to have relationship trouble. But it does mean that you're probably going to have relationships and you probably will have a lot of really successful ones. But it's not like a guarantee to joy. It's not a guarantee to success, but it does increase your likelihood of having that planet do those things effectively. In the case of Venus or Jupiter, that's usually a good thing. If Venus and Jupiter are doing their stuff really effectively, that's usually favorable. Depending on sect and a lot of other conditions and that interplay of other planets, sometimes the benefics can do too much of a good thing. And then that planet is like, yeah, it's very effective, but that's actually not helping me out. So for instance, like Venus problems, a really effective Venus in the first house can sometimes speak to like people-pleasing tendencies that end up really harming the person potentially. Jupiter, excesses of various kinds, entitlements of very entitled behavior of various kinds with Jupiter sometimes when there's too much of a good thing. I don't see that one too much, but I do see it. It's easier to think, okay, what happens when we have a really strong Saturn, like when we had Saturn in Aquarius and all of society got like restricted for a couple years, 3 years. That is what happens when Saturn was really effective. Then what did we see when Saturn went into Pisces? All of those restrictions loosened, so when malefics are really in good condition, in domicile, in exaltation, Saturn and Libra, that's a powerful Saturn. And you have to ask, what is that going to do to that person? And are they going to like it? Saturn might like it. That person might not. Versus, let's say we have Saturn in Pisces and then someone's 12th house. And it's a night chart. That's kind of great. Like, I want to just tuck Saturn away, if they're not very powerful, then they're not giving my night chart a problem, as much of a problem. So that's how I handle that. But then what is it like? I didn't really describe fall. So fall is the opposite of exaltation. So think about what's the opposite of being like the guest of honor. It's like someone who's at your party who wasn't invited. Like, who invited that guy? So we're not going to give him the best, if we're like being horrible people, we're not going to give him like the best tater tot hot dish or whatever. We're not maybe even going to offer that person any resources. Like, that might be one way of looking at it. Like, say the sun in Aquarius, or not the sun in Aquarius, sorry. We'll just go with the Pisces, the Mercury and Pisces example. Another one would be, Mars in Cancer. That would be an example of a planet in fall. But in any event, it is someone like where there's like, instead of having an affinity of qualities with each other, instead of having things, like Venus being aligned in Libra to do what she needs to do, planets in fall are unaligned in their places to do what they need to do. So Mars needs to be really direct. Yeah, let's do Mars. That's an easy example for my brain right now. Mars in Cancer. Mars needs to be really direct. And in Cancer, we have to be indirect because we can't just be taking risks. In Cancer, we understand the vulnerability of being alive. There's a lot of risks just being soft and squishy. So no, I'm not just going to do that crazy thing. Excuse me, Mars. So then Mars feels really hampered sometimes or impeded or frustrated that it's not given the agency to kind of do what it needs to do. It's not in a place that aligns with its essential nature. Now, that being said, if we think about dignity, Mars is in a night sign. It has triplicity dignity in water signs. So Mars in Cancer, yeah, it's in fall. But I mean, that's not the worst. That's my own opinion. I'm kind of trying to weigh like concepts on scales that don't exist or you can't really actually measure. But I think Mars, there is a lot of potential for helpful things here. And with any planet in its fall, you're going to see like really creative outcomes. So like Mars in Cancer, we're going to put that kind of like effort, that ability to place effort, that ability to go after something, that ability to be offensive offense and defense. Mars does both. In a nocturnal water sign, Mars can do defense. So then we get people who are protecting the vulnerable. We get people who are standing up and advocating for women or children or, any kind of soft, squishy, vulnerable situation. So it's not that a planet in fall can't do really beautiful things. And in fact, I think most people, I see them, they've found a way to make that planet in fall like have a really healthy, cool outlet. But they're also going to most likely run into a lot of frustration because we get back into that space of being subculture. But whereas like being in exile or antithesis, there's certainly like a subculture thing to me. I feel like planets in fall, it's almost like they're stigmatized as well, like, and even maligned, which feels really strong, but that can be an experience people have. So yeah, hopefully that gives kind of a quick and dirty explanation of what those words mean. They are just ways to talk about a planet's condition, how effective that planet is going to be at doing its stuff. And that is also a separate question of how is that going to turn out for the native? Because a planet being effective at doing its stuff is not necessarily going to help the person. And it might help the person, but we also have to ask what that person is doing. So, of course, I'm in Wisconsin and I have to use the example of Jeffrey Dahmer, which I'm not going to pull up his chart, but Jeffrey Dahmer, and I've seen at least one other serial killer, I can't remember his name now, a ton of domiciled planets, lots of like quote unquote well-resourced planets in their homes. And yeah, he was pretty effective at doing a lot of stuff, but it was pretty messed up stuff. So, again, we have to ask like, yeah, effective. And then what does that actually turn out as in that life? So the technique only gets us so far, but it kind of means nothing when we don't have it applied to a context with like reason, if that makes sense. But that was such a good question. Thank you so much, Fallen. I appreciate you. You are a regular. Thank you. We're pretty much at time, like last call. I don't think there's anything else. Let's see. Oh no, there are some comments. Yeah. Planets in fall and antithesis and all of those less resource positions, they are really forced to be adaptable and flexible and yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, Nicholas has also run into clients who have been kind of spooked by these harsh sounding technical terms. Yeah, which is interesting. Didn't realize that was going to be a transferable skill for medicine. Like I feel like medicine, it was just constantly this juggling thing of like trying not to scare people with stuff. Turns out that's still helpful. Oh, hi, Reverend Kai. Welcome back. Exalted Saturn and Libra conjunct the midheaven. Wow. I'm so jealous of that too. That just sounds great to me. Oh, although I have a pretty good Saturn. I like my Saturn a lot. My brother has one of those actually. That's another cute little subgeneration. The 1981 people, the 1980, 81, 82 people. No, it couldn't have been. It must have just been around 81, but it was the Jupiter and Saturn in Libra people. Those people, man, they're just kicking ass, like totally kicking ass. Stars and gamers, any recommendations for astrologers who specialize in synastry? Me. I mean, I don't know if I can call myself like a specialist because I do more than that, but I do it. I actually just added it to my website. So I've been doing it as kind of a secret menu option for a while, and because I just hadn't figured out the intake form, because it was really important to me that with my synastry work that I had expressed consent from the other person, because most of the time it's not two people coming in. Most of the time, oh my gosh, see, there's balloons. I got to figure out what the hell this update did. Because I don't want balloons coming up when I'm talking about heavy stuff. Like that would be bad. That would be in bad taste. I need to do it right after this. This is getting ridiculous. It's been happening in consult. Oh my God. Anyway, synastry, express consent. Sometimes it's like a parent and we're talking about their minor child to help with communication. That child isn't going to be there. Sometimes it's a partner and the partner has to take care of the baby during the consult because they got a baby. Sometimes it's the other partner has to work and it's really hard to schedule two people, it turns out. So if I can at least just get express consent from the second person beforehand, like we're all good. But yeah, I finally figured that out. I put it on my website. It's up there. But in lieu of me, the people that I have learned from have been, and I don't think Demetra George is doing consults. Robert Hand is definitely not doing consults. David Pond, he is, and I have taken a few lectures from David Pond. He's amazing. He's a different synastry astrologer. He has more experience than me. So if you want to go to someone more experienced, that's totally cool. Who else? I feel like Kelly, I don't know if Kelly Surtees does. I know she can. I'm sure she can. I don't know if it's like an offering she has. Yeah, I don't really know who else. I know there are people out there. Like I'm sure there are more. Does anyone know in the chat? If anyone knows any other synastry astrologers, throw them in there. But yeah, I do. Don't forget the discount codes. Creating Harmony says, as a person with a few domiciled planets, they can cause ego and unreliability. Detriment seems like it builds character. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't, it's hard because I don't have any basis for comparison. What I've noticed, and this is the toughest thing I see with people with a lot of domiciled planets, especially more than one, and this is the analogy that I use, so people can feel free to take this and use this with people in their lives or their clients. It's like having a bunch of Michelin star chefs in one kitchen, and they all want to do their type of cuisine, and they're all really good at it, but there are only 24 hours in a day. And I feel like the person who's like in between all of these like domiciled planets, they're just kind of getting yanked around by all these really strong, competent kind of impulses, for lack of more eloquent, details there. That's kind of one of the challenges I see, is just like how to hold that. And of course, ton of potential for great things, right? Let's see. But yeah, definitely complicated, definitely nuance. Thank you, Reverend Kai. The balloons are from an Apple camera thing. I did an update on my laptop. See, this is why I need to get out of my house and talk to people more. And this is kind of me doing that. Thank you. I learned things when I leave my house. I love it. Let's see. Do I have any other questions? I think that's it. Let me make sure. Look at my little list. I didn't even look at my backlog. I have a backlog of questions, but I didn't get to any of those. Nah. That's probably good. Yeah, I think just check out those links below. Check out Leisa Schaim's lecture. Check out that House Divisions podcast. It's like 4 hours long. It's so good. And if you have that question that a lot of us do of like, why is everyone arguing about house systems? And should I be using whole sign or Placidus or why? Like definitely, I think all of your questions will be answered by that one podcast. And it has really helped me to understand as well, like the why, which is always the most important thing, is just knowing why you are doing what you're doing. Which of course I always say the history is so important, in knowing how, this quote unquote Western astrology came into being. It also tells us about the techniques. So in some way, creating harmony, domicile placements are unrelatable, but not unreliable. Oh, I was like, yeah, I was like, really unrelatable. I thought they were like kind of consistent. But yeah, unrelatable. Yeah. I mean, to have such a pure expression of a planet, has to be like quite the experience. Yeah, it's like people who are, really gifted at something don't necessarily realize that they're gifted at something. And part of that is just like, does a fish know that it's wet? Like, no, a fish is just, they're in the water. That's where they live. So it's not like, I don't think like maybe it can come off as an ego thing, but I think more it's like the fish in the water not knowing that it's wet, or like me not knowing I'm surrounded by oxygen and nitrogen. I just kind of, I don't know, I just exist. I don't really think about it. Um, yeah. Yeah, I love that way of looking at that. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you sharing your experience. Um yeah, I think that's it. So let me just do my little announcements again. Books are open, www.aligninglightastrology.com. Use all of the discounts. Sign up for my newsletter because that's where the discounts really come from. I have a constant discount. You can use Astrology Podcast it's before checkout, and that will give you 10% off. What else? Doing the reading group. We're finally starting chapter 3 next month. It's going to be the first Saturday of December 2nd. I believe it's around 1 p.m. Stay tuned. If you're part of Chris's Hellenistic astrology course, you are who I am addressing here. That's the book club is for the Hellenistic group. Feel free to sign up whenever you like. You do not have to. If you missed the beginning, that's totally fine. We've got many more chapters to do, and you are welcome to join. Other than that, I'll just be here for my usual stuff. I have not scheduled anything, so stay tuned. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your participation and your lovely engagement and your awesome questions. Thank you, everyone on Instagram who answered my call for questions. I really appreciate you. But yeah, take care. Everyone have a great night. I'll see you next month.